So our presentation today, Teaching via Video Conference, is mainly about more of the pedagogy side and how to prepare and how to manage a video classroom. So we'll talk about some best practices for each of those things. If you're looking for a more technical workshop, I do a workshop on Zoom. It is not really possible for me to do the actual workshop about Zoom on Zoom because you aren't able to see my actual window, but it's something that we could attempt if you wanted to at some point, give it a try, but I'm not able to show you exactly what my window looks like because I'm using it to provide it. But anyway, today we'll be talking more about the planning processes and classroom management and pedagogy ideas for this presentation. If at any time you have a question or something that you'd like to hone in on while we're going, let me know. The other individual did not show up. I'm not sure if he'll be popping in late or not, but with only one or two of you, I can customize this to kind of meet any specific questions or ideas you'd like to discuss. So don't feel that you have to wait until the end. Feel free to pop in and ask a question or comment at any time. We're going to go ahead and get started. I had also sent you an email, and with that email, I have a lot of different handouts, and I also have all of that posted online. So before we get out of here today, I will take you in to show you where that is. So we are not going to be doing the polling with Pear Deck today. So when you see those at the bottom of my screen, just feel free to ignore those. I don't have enough people in here to do that. So as we come to the questions, I'll just go ahead and ask you to reflect on those questions and just give me a short idea of your thoughts on that. So the first question I had to kind of make this a little bit more interactive and get you thinking is, do you currently teach via video conference? Now this could be desktop video conference using something like Zoom or Skype. It could also be in one of the traditional, what they call codec video conference classrooms with a Polycom, like the ones that go between classrooms in Macomb and Quad Cities. So I'm just wondering, do you currently have or previously have any experience of teaching in this fashion?
I do, and actually what's kind of funny is I used to do the workshops on how to sort of effectively teach through video conference, you know.
Oh,
so
well, then you'll have to tell me. You'll have to tell me if I'm doing okay.
No pressure. I guess I just wanted to see if there was any other thoughts from a tech expert compared to what, you know.
Well, we'll see, and we'll have to talk afterwards and see what you think compared, because I never had been able to attend any of your workshops either.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, well, so the first thing is just what is one important question that you hope to have answered today? And we do have another participant jumping on right now, so I'll go ahead. On the screen now, what is one important question that you hope to have answered or discussed today? So yeah, I just would like both of you just kind of share at least one important question or something that you'd like to learn today.
I would like to learn how to implement this into maybe a high school classroom, or if we could do video calls with other classrooms, if that's even possible.
Yeah, it is. We might talk about a little bit of that today. We're going to be talking a lot about how to plan for a video conference classroom, how to set that up pedagogically. We'll talk about etiquette and classroom management and that sort of thing. I do have a handout with different ideas of how you could use it in the classroom, and I can also send that out to you guys as well.
Okay.
Okay, Susan?
I guess my thing is, whenever I've taught with this, it's really difficult to get the other side to engage, and in many cases they're on their phones, and just classroom management for the remote end of it.
And a lot of that too is about, and that's one thing we'll talk about, and I have a handout that really goes over it really well. keeping your course an active learning course as opposed to letting it become a passive course. Sometimes, I know, especially like at the university level that we're at, faculty might only find out a week or two before it's time for their class to be offered that they're going to be teaching it in this modality. And I think a lot of times that turns into something where we believe that it has to basically be lecture. And that's really one of the, in my opinion, worst things that can happen to a two-way or multiple-way video conference course, because that's the easiest way to lose the engagement from the students who are not present in the room with the instructor. So I think having a wide range of activities that you can use to still keep both sides actively engaging with each other and with you. So we will talk about some ideas for that today. Is that kind of along the lines of what you were thinking?
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay, great. So we're gonna start out and we're gonna kind of chunk this into some different phases. We're gonna start by talking about pre-planning and things that you can do prior to. Now, in a perfect world, you should have some time to prep this class, just as if you were gonna change to an online class, right? You're gonna change to new modality. However, I know that this is not always a perfect world. So what's going to happen is sometimes you're not going to have all of this time to plan. So I hope that being able to give you guys these points is something you'll always kind of keep in the back of your head as you're planning regular courses. What if this were to turn into a video conference course, and how might I be able to kind of pre-plan for that? But what we're specifically talking about today would be perfect world's case scenario, and that you have enough time to plan. So starting out, my question here, Peyton, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to mute your microphone until you want to talk. And if you want to talk, just kind of raise your hand to the screen. Or when I ask a question, I'll unmute you because we're getting some feedback. So I'm going to go ahead and let you guys answer this question. And then as I'm presenting, I'll mute the microphone and then I'll unmute it. So what do you guys think about this question? Do face-to-face courses need modified before being taught via video conference?
I would say yes. Do you need to be modified? Like, do you need to change them before, when you're changing the format?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, like when I've taught in the past, you know, if there's team presentations, I kind of do, you know, one in the QC, one in Macomb, one in the QC. I have sent things to Macomb because I tend to only be on the QC end because I have a class right before or after it, unfortunately. So I send things to Macomb, like I sent a couple like foam fingers, so like when somebody had a question, they would like their giant finger.
That's a good idea.
You know, and I would send streets to both locations. Like I tried everything to make it fair, and I included the names of everybody on a sheet so everybody can, you know, try to use each other's names when they're talking to a classmate, that kind of stuff.
Very good. Okay, Peyton, do you have any ideas on that?
I kind of agree with what she said. That's a pretty good idea.
Yep.
Never really done it, so I mean, I don't really know any like tips or anything, but that seems like a pretty good strategy, what she said. Good deal.
So you guys may or may not have this available right now, but in the list of handouts that I sent you, you'll have a page, and it's out of a book. It's an older book, but they have some great ideas in there. And it'll be page 85, and it's called Modification Guidelines. And it will go in and identify some different things that you would want to modify when moving from a traditional face-to-face format to an actual video conferencing format. So just a few of those are identifying only 3 to 4 key points per class period. dependent upon how much time or how long your class is. Theoretically, a video conference course is going to take up a little more time as far as transmitting audio and video back and forth and organizing everyone than if you are all in the room together. So try not to cram too much material into one session. Again, how much you're going to add is going to depend on, you know, how long your class is. But 3 to 4 key points per class period based on a certain learning performance objective that you can measure to determine that they have met that objective or not by the end of the class period. You're also going to have to think about new ways to motivate your students. Being that they're not all going to be in the same room with you, some of the ways that you could do that may not transfer as well in the video conference course. So you're gonna have to find new ways to motivate and engage those students. Having an upfront overview of what the lesson is about and why they need to learn it is always really good. We know that's good in a face-to-face as well as an online, but talk to your students about what they're learning and why they need to learn that for their actual authentic future job or field work or future class work. It's really good to use multiple examples and non-examples of the concepts that you're trying to teach. So use as many examples as you can during the class period. Use transition statements. So this is not something that you're typically going to do in a face-to-face course, but it is important in a video conference course. If you're going to be switching from a lecture over to a group project, state that. Say, we're going to be moving on into our group projects now. So that way students at various sites or at home will know, oh, we're reassembling if we're at 2 classroom sites, or, oh, we're going to get put into breakout rooms soon if we're all virtually online. So they can be ready to transition into the next phase of the class. Always put the lesson in context. That goes right along with motivating the students to learn. Anytime that you can visualize information, visualize that information. The less text that you can provide, the better. So if you have something that takes several words to explain, but it can be shown better in a image or diagram or chart or graph, go ahead and put that in a visualization of some sort. Always divide your topic and lesson into small segments. So think about having an introduction, and then you might move into maybe 3 to 5 minute lecture overview. Then you might break into a group project. You might go back to lecture for a few minutes. You might break into an individual time of work. But go ahead and keep moving the class to different segments. Keep the students active at both locations so they don't have time to become unengaged with what you're doing in the classroom. If you're lecturing for 40 minutes, they're going to start maybe reading something else, maybe looking at something on their phone. But if you can keep them, you know, moving from segment to segment, and within that have a large portion of that be active, focused work, you're more than likely going to keep that attention and engagement throughout the class period. So we're going to talk a little bit more about continuing to modify those courses, but I do have another question for you guys. And my question is, in a video conference, how much of the time do you think students should be involved in activities or exercises, not listening to lecture, but actually doing activities and exercises? How much time?
I think 50%.
50%, okay. Peyton?
Yeah, I'd say about 30-40%. Maybe if it was like an hour class, do like a 20-minute activity or so.
Okay, I think that you both got that right. Let's go to my next slide and see. Yep, here you go. Involve students in activities or exercises at least 30, preferably 50% of the time. So you both were on target with that answer. Great job. So what are some other things you can do? Plan plenty of questions and inquiry activities throughout the lesson. So you might be lecturing, but go ahead and make sure that you plan times to stop and ask questions. So one of the things that I'm doing today, and we just have the two of you, so I didn't turn it on, and I teach another workshop on this, but it's called polling, and I'm using a program called Pear Deck. So if we had multiple students at different sites, I would turn that on, and each of those questions that I ask you would be an on-screen poll. So as your fellow students answered, that poll would come up and you would see how many answered 50%, how many answered 30%. So being able to have things like that, or just like I'm doing now, when you can ask a question every few minutes so that people can be thinking about the concepts and applying them to their own situation, that can be very helpful. Change your pacing. So as you're going through, if you're actually presenting, change up the pacing a little bit, just to keep people guessing or keep them encouraged and wondering what's coming next. Develop effective verbal and nonverbal presentation skills. So it's very important to work on your nonverbal presentation skills, especially when you're going to be on video conference. And one of the things that I still struggle with, and we'll talk about this multiple times today, is looking at the students at the remote site. It's harder for me in a desktop video conferencing situation for me to be looking in that camera if I'm trying to do something on the other end, like go through a presentation. So being able to keep yourself looking through that camera, because that's how you're going to be maintaining that eye contact with your students. Sometimes it's easier in the classrooms because you have many times in the back of your classroom, you'll have a monitor, which is often called a modesty panel, where you'll have the students at the other locations on that window, and then you'll have the camera mounted above it. So you're kind of looking at them, and the camera is catching your face because it's mounted right above where you're looking. So that can be helpful as far as working on those type of presentation skills. When you're setting this up, we'll talk about planning the lesson, but go ahead and try to time all activities and exercises so that you can keep the class moving along. So when you break for a group project or a full class project, go ahead and put a timer on that. You could even have one of the students and rotate that around to be the timer for that, so that you can keep the class moving and accomplish everything that you want to accomplish for that particular lesson. Define all new vocabulary prior to the class. So anything new that you might be using in terms of vocabulary, words that you might be saying, make sure that that's all been given to them up front in advance so that they can study those and be familiar with those prior to the video conferencing class. So here is another question. So basically it is, instructors should what every lesson and provide a copy of students and their provide a copy of that to their students and their facilitators. What do you guys think?
The new vocabulary isn't that what you said?
Yeah, this is, yep, this is a bigger overall thing. It's basically plan. Instructors should plan every lesson. So they should have a lesson plan or an agenda for each course meeting that's going to happen via video conference. And if you guys go to your emails, I have given you a template for a lesson plan for video conference courses. So it's like a one-page template. Why is this important? This is important so the students can prepare for the video conference class. So you can have all of the materials posted to a website or probably Western Online Course Management System so that they can have all materials and necessary items with them. They can have completed any kind of work that they needed to complete prior to the class in front of them. So providing a lesson plan lets them get everything ready. It also lets them see the different transitions that are going to happen throughout the course. So if they need to assemble into a group, or if they're going to be moved into a virtual breakout room, a variety of different things, it lets them plan. So some of the different things that you'll want to do is to create that lesson plan. The other thing is to develop a short student manual. If you make your syllabus very detailed, which we'll talk about in a minute, I'm not so sure that you need a manual, but that's another suggestion. So when you're going to, now I flick through this lesson plan, we'll go back because you may or may not have this in front of you. But when you do your lesson plan, and you have an example that you can use in your email, you'll want to go ahead for each meeting. It's kind of like an agenda or lesson plan. You want to say what the topic is, the date and the time, and then the location. So if it's something that's being offered between Macomb and Quad Cities, you could put that on there. If it's being offered from home, Macomb and Quad Cities, you could put that on there. Susan, I know when you had talked about being teaching this way, you said you were usually at the Quad Cities. There are some instructors who will go different places, so they will alternate the site that they're at. So when you do these, I would be making sure that you would put on your lesson plan where you're going to be that particular class period, if you're going to be doing alternation for your location. Other things that you would want to include in the lesson plan would be your objectives. So the 3 to 4 key ideas that you will be discussing and learning about in that class time. A list of any required materials that they need to have printed or readily available online so that they can get there. This can also include links to presentations or videos that you'll show in case they don't transmit okay through the technology. So having those links so students can pull them up locally rather than you trying to send them if you're having a bad technology night. You'll want to provide a sequence of the lesson with estimated time allotments depending on the length of your class. So this could look like a review of the previous class period and any outside work for a couple minutes, a preview of the current class, so talk about the objectives, motivate the students as to why they need to learn what they're going to learn, provide them basically maybe a graphic organizer or something like that to show them the specifics of the lesson. Present any new essential or remediated content. So direct presentation shouldn't take any more than 10 minutes of the class time. Again, that depends how long your class is. So you may have 2 or 3 different 10-minute segments, depending how long it is, but you shouldn't go any more than 10 minutes at a time for sure. If it's a shorter class period, you may not want to go any longer than 5. Always involve your students in activities. Another handout that I've sent you guys is a sheet of activities that you can try in a video conference course. And I have taken these from a book that I really like. So if there's something in here or something that's not in here and you want more ideas, let me know and I can probably come up with more ideas. But some examples are small group projects. So you could give a project prior to the video conference course that they have to complete in a defined amount of time, and then they could come in and discuss that or present it. You could do snowball groups. You could do a polling. So I've already kind of talked about polling. Have students do something like a press conference where they ask random questions from their field after a short presentation from the instructor. They can also spontaneously be asked by individual student sites. If you have a large group of students, I would recommend doing something like that, small group, where they assign a speaker for each group. So they might discuss something amongst themselves and then have one person speak out to the entire class. Panel discussions, role plays, simulations, individual storytelling. There's all kinds of different things in here that you could do. You could even organize a debate. So you could have students maybe at one location debate with students in another location, or if these people are all at home, you could use a breakout room feature if you have that available in your tool, and have students divide up in that way to do a debate. So a variety of different types of activities that you can try in the video conference classroom that are not going to be passive. They will be active things that they can do. After activities, always summarize your class. And then finally, before you dismiss, prepare and motivate them for the next class meeting. So talk about anything that they need to work on between this class period and the next, explain where they can find resources, and when possible, provide them a place to communicate between classes. So that could be a discussion board in Western Online, could be a Twitter feed, but somewhere that they can work together and communicate outside of the classroom, so that they can make that connection a little bit easier than just in the time that they have via video conference every week.
I had a question.
Sure.
Or not, it was more of a statement, but so what are some things that, since you teach in the Quad Cities, Susan, that you do? Like, do you do polls, or do you do what Dawn liked with the having one student speak up per group? So what do you do to involve like the students?
I've done a lot of different things. I generally have taught the class, I like on a Monday, Wednesday. So the way I have approached it in the past is I'm probably too heavy on lecture, but I do like lecture, say Monday, and then Wednesday we apply the information. And in between Monday and Wednesday, there's an online quiz. So it's sort of like learn it, get measured as to whether you understand it, and then do something with it. But I guess one thing I've encountered, because I've had so many on each side, like usually 20 to 25 on each place, that it's classroom management's kind of difficult. Like there's chatter, there's, on the remote end of things. So that's been a real struggle for me. And not everybody can fit in the camera view. So I guess I need to get even more creative with some of the things that I've tried. But overall, like the teams, if there's teams that'll do, in-class activities, or we've had a debate before where it's like, one team in Macomb is on one side of the issue, and then a team in Quad Cities is on the other side. And then everybody comes with position papers, and they have to have pre-developed questions for the debate teams. I've tried a lot of different things. I think the biggest thing is going to the other location. Unfortunately, every time I've taught video conference, I can't go to the other location because of a class that's literally like either right before or after it in the Quad Cities. But that makes a big difference. Just, like being a regular on the other location. I don't know if that helps or.
Yeah, it does. I thought the polling was a good idea. If you could get, like, if you had an app, I know I've had in some classes where you have an app and they can enter them on their phones, but I don't know if that would be even a good idea to do, or. Yeah,
Peyton, what I use traditionally for this is I use a Pear Deck, and it's basically just an add-on for Google Docs, and they can then submit in their answers from any device.
Oh, okay.
Couple of other ideas I'll just throw out there that I didn't mention on the sheet. So being that you are video conference, one of the things would be, and I know Susan, you said you're always kind of in the Quad Cities. One opportunity that you guys can take, depending where you're at, and the fact that you can go video conference, would be the ability to bring in more guest lecturers or more subject matter experts into your classroom. So being able to invite someone else into your class via video conference. Also the ability for you, if you've got students at multiple sites and they can take care of themselves, or you can have a grad student in or something for the day, you being able to possibly geographically travel somewhere to do like a virtual tour where maybe you are touring through with someone at a business or a school, and you're able to take your camera into that and kind of talk through that with someone and send that back to your students live where they can interact and ask questions. Those are also some out-of-the-box ideas that you might be able to do via video conference that may not be as easy for you to do face-to-face. So there's a couple of ideas there. Virtual field trips, there are lots of people that want to connect up with different classrooms around the country, around the world, to be able to do that for diversity and cultural type projects as well. So we're going to talk about the syllabus now, and just like with the lesson plan, I have provided a template that you can modify in there using even our accessible template format that we use in online courses, but this has been basically changed to be for a video conference. So you're going to want to include all required information that you would typically share on your regular syllabus, but the following items should be added and paid close attention to. A detailed calendar and schedule of class meetings that clearly shows where you will be teaching from if you rotate sites. So again, if you don't rotate sites, then that's not going to be such a big deal. But if you do rotate sites, you need to say where that's going to be. Make sure that if you have a facilitator or you do not have a facilitator, that you have technical support contacts, a phone number that the students will need to call in case their site's not working. So that technical support can happen through that channel, not through you while you're trying to offer and do the course, right? You don't want to be troubleshooting technical problems when you're trying to manage the class period. If you have a course facilitator, include their name and a brief introduction of them in your syllabus so that your students get to learn who that person is and why they are there. If you do not have this information by the time that you need to send out your syllabus, go ahead and include it as supplemental course information on your website or in your course management system once you have that. If you don't have a facilitator, but you have the option to have a colleague or a student or grad student moderate your classes, I definitely recommend you take them up on that. When you want to deliver a good class, you want to be focused on that content and the activities involved and not need to worry as much about technical difficulties or someone getting your attention if they have a question. Having a moderator will allow that person to help keep some of that at bay for you and answer questions that you may not need to stop the class to answer. That may not always be possible, but if it is, it's definitely a best practice to have someone in there moderating. They do not need to be in the room with you. Technically, I could sit here in my office and moderate 2 or 3 classes at a time if I wanted to. So that's just an idea. So when you're working on your syllabus, make sure that you add the element of video conferencing etiquette as an expectation up front. And a lot of this may seem like common sense, but it's something that we don't always think about. We'll talk about these a little bit more in a moment, but I also have these on a worksheet handout, which is part of the emails that I sent you. You can feel free to copy and paste the information we've provided out of there into your own syllabus and reword it however you want. And we'll talk more specifically about what these are in a minute. You want to make sure that your students receive a copy of the syllabus in advance to the initial class so that they can prepare. If you have a course facilitator or moderator, share a copy of that and go over it with them so they know how the course is going to fold or unfold and go. So this is just going back in activities. What is the amount of time that should be spent on direct lecture or presentation of the content? Do you guys have any numbers to throw out there?
I guess I would go 50 since I said 50 for the activities.
Okay, good.
Yeah, for the maximum, I'd say maybe 75 or 70-ish%.
Okay. Direct presentation of content, 10 minutes max. So it depends on how long your class is. And as I said, that could be multiple segments of 10 minutes if you've got a really long class. This is, again, we've talked about the lesson plan, so I'm going to go on over that. We're going to talk a little bit now about the documents that you typically use in your face-to-face courses. What do you guys see needing to be changed? So think about the documents that you typically use in your classrooms and just start thinking about if they'll need to be changed in any way. You don't need to answer that, but as I go through this next section, be thinking about what you currently use. So documents that you might typically show in a classroom via document camera or Elmo, such as printed handouts, posters, pointing to a bulletin board, you know, you may need to get those digitized so that you can share them electronically during the class. You could also share recordings of the courses for students to review. But one of the big things is if you've always taught in a face-to-face classroom, if you're putting anything up on a bulletin board or something that stays in that room all the time, you're going to have to find a way to digitize that. It's getting easier since we have cell phones and we can snap pictures, but you do have to think about those kind of things. Understand that the software, the hardware that you would be using now will allow you to do screen sharing functions. So once you get documents digitized, you'll be able to share those live during the class. Some systems that we have on campus and elsewhere will allow you to connect the document camera and go ahead and show printed items just as you would in a face-to-face class via the screen. But if not, you would want to have those available in a digital format as well by scanning them in with a scanner or using a scanning app for your phone or your tablet. It's highly recommended. I would almost say that it needs to happen. Post these on a supplemental course management system so students have them prior to the class time so that they can pull these up in case they're having trouble seeing them. Collect and grade assignments via the assignments tool and grade them possibly using the Turnitin and grading features. That's always going to be a question is, well, how do you collect those assignments from students at the remote sites? Go ahead and set up electronic drop boxes in your course management tool so that they can submit those electronically. If possible, go ahead and administer your assessments and quizzes via your quizzes or assessments feature within your course management system. Our course management system, Western Online, has the ability to turn on a lockdown browser, which does help with academic integrity and cheating. We also have, it costs the students $10 a semester, but we have Respondus Monitor, which for more higher stakes tests will turn, so the student would have to have a web camera, but that would be on and it would be recording them throughout the entirety of the time they're taking their tests. So the instructor can watch that to make sure that there was no dishonesty happening. We already kind of said, provide open discussion areas so students from both sites can get to know each other a little bit better and share ideas, ask each other questions in between classes. When you're preparing your course documents, Word documents, spreadsheets, presentations, make sure the text is legible. It has to be legible to you on a piece of paper, but that's not necessarily going to be legible on the computer screen once it's been compressed and sent through video. It's getting better every day so that we don't have to worry about it as much, but it's something to always keep in mind. So when you're designing your documents, use a large, bold sans serif font because these are going to be shown over the screen. So sans serif are going to be those fonts such as Helvetica, Arial, the ones that don't have any kind of curly cues at the bottom. The one that I'm using in my presentation today is called Lato, L-A-T-O, but stay away from your Times New Roman type fonts. Those are good for printed documents, but not so good for documents that are going to be shown on the screen. Restrict the amount of font types you use. Don't use more than 3 fonts per document. That can get busy and kind of bothersome. Use a contrasting background and text color. So if you have a dark background, use a light text or a dark text with a light background. You'll see me use a lot of black and white when I'm doing video conferencing. It doesn't have to be black and white. but you want to have a dark on light or light on dark contrast. Anytime, I've already mentioned this, anytime you can replace large data sets and numbers with charts, graphs, or maps, go ahead and use that. Replace Word with word pictures, clip art, and photos. Limit your transitions and animations. Now, if you need a transition or an animation to show how something comes together or outline a process, by all means use that. But if you're one of those people who likes to use transition or animation so that each item bounces in at its own time, those are the ones that you need to limit, because when you're transferring this over video, you may have a 2 to 3 second lag on someone's end, depending on the network that they have. So if you're using those transitions and animations, it's going to take longer for that slide to come in, and you may already be talking into the next slide by the time they're seeing what was in the slide that you had previously. So there'll be a lag. Try and limit that. If you're going to show videos, try and keep those short and concise, and always provide links or an alternate way for the students to access them in case they do not pass through that system well. Now we're going to talk about the etiquette. So as I said, I have this etiquette page for you, and this is something as instructors we should model this, we should enforce it during our classes, and we should set an expectation for it up front to make sure that there's a positive learning experience at both sites or all sites. So avoid side conversation, shuffling paper, tapping pens, non-essential noise of any kind. Microphones will pick up everything, and it can make it really hard for the remote locations. So just have that discussion up front. Also have the discussion about microphones. So just like Peyton, earlier I told you I was going to possibly mute your mic. Tell your students that and tell them there's nothing wrong. They haven't done anything wrong, but there are times that we might hear something on one end that they may not hear. So you may just take the ability to mute that, or you may ask them to do that themselves. Don't chew gum, eat, or drink in these classes, because again, that's all picked up by the microphones. Make eye contact with the individuals you're speaking to by looking into that camera, not at the projection screen. And I do struggle with this, but that's a big thing. Try to make that eye contact with them. Show that you're listening by nodding your head and looking into the camera. Direct questions or comments to a particular person at the remote site by stating their name to gain their attention. So this is one that we probably don't think about a lot, but it's one that's very important. So you've got to get used to calling the students by their name to get their attention. And you have to prepare the other students in the class to do the same from both sites. So during class and the delivery of class, these are going to be some classroom management strategies. So here's a question I want you to go ahead and think about and answer. Can one expect that it will be as easy to identify all students at the remote site as it is at local sites? Yes or no, and why do you think that is?
I would say no.
Good.
Because you don't have that face-to-face contact. You might only communicate with them through the class. You might know a few people, but you might not recognize all the faces or all the people in the class.
Very good. Thank you.
I agree, having done it, like I said earlier, a lot of times the students can't fit into the camera, so I can't even see them.
Yep. Good.
Challenge.
Exactly. Those were the answers I was looking for. So here are some ideas. Sometimes it's going to be difficult to see who's talking. So knowing who's speaking provides cues that will allow you to follow up later, and it will also foster that engagement. So require self-identification. Whoops. Always have the students say their name and location if there are more than 2 locations. So for example, this is John Doe from WIU Quad Cities, before sharing or asking a question. Get them in the habit of saying their name before sharing. Now, if you're in a workshop like today, you guys are not at 2 sites. So you don't need to say Quad Cities. You could just say, this is Susan Stewart. This is Peyton Porter. But go ahead and get in the habit of saying your name up front before you talk. It lets people put a voice with a name. It also just helps identify who's talking. Until everybody is used to this, the instructor, students might need to prompt each other to state their names before speaking. Additionally, if you're at 2 different sites, seating charts or a table tent identification card might also help with this. If they can write really large in a way that the camera might be able to pick that up, seating charts and table tent identification might help. If it's really bad, having the student come up more to where the camera is obviously can also help. Sometimes the problem, as Susan said, sometimes they're not in the camera shot. Sometimes they are in the camera shot, but the lighting is not good in the rooms, and you might see a face, but you can't make out who that person is. It might look more like a shadow. But if a white table tent with large black writing would show up, that might allow you to identify the name of that student. And I think, Susan, do you want to share, you had said you had a good idea of using a pointer?
Yeah, you know, either like a giant foam finger or
To
like
show
a
who wants
paddle,
to talk. Yeah.
like paddle fans, you know, yeah, if somebody wants to say something, they kind of got a kick out of it because, you know, there was only like 1 or 2 at the remote location,
Yeah.
and so they'd have to pass it to the person that wanted to ask and that kind of thing.
That's a good idea. Always use microphone awareness. So again, it's not something you might think that you have to explain to your students, but it's always good to set this expectation up front. Generally, the microphones are always on in the video conferencing classrooms, and almost all sounds from each location can be heard. We already talked about, you know, all these things that can be seen and heard, or seen and heard, whispering, side comments, that type of thing. Explain to your students to use microphone awareness and restraint. Again, clarify that there may be times that you'll mute the microphones to cut down. Doesn't mean they've done anything wrong. Depending on if you're using a Western license, sometimes when you're teaching via Zoom, the student microphones may be turned off by default, and they must use the chat feature to request that they be unmuted by you or the facilitator in order to speak. It just depends on how yours is set up. Consider these tips when you're getting ready to teach. So try and arrive in your virtual space a little bit early to test all of your video and audio connections, make sure your screen sharing is working, all of that. You have the facilitator or moderator work with them to make sure they know your plan for the course. So you can talk to them about, you know, the plan, give them your lesson plan and say, you know, at this point, I really need you to help me turn my camera, or I need you to watch the chat in case they have questions on this or that. Mute your own microphone when you're not speaking to the students at the remote sites, and have them all mute theirs when they're not speaking. That just takes care of all the feedback that you might receive from the system. When possible, adjust the lighting in the room. Now, there may not be a lot you can do by the lighting, but don't turn them down too low because the cameras work best in well-lit areas, but also make sure that the wall behind what the video is pointing at is darker than the face or the body in front of it. Too much backlighting will make that shadow. Now, you may not be able to control for this, but this is something to think about if you can. If you can, adjust the room cameras so the instructor fills the screen and it's a good visual. Make sure that you zoom in on yourself enough so that they can see your facial expressions. Keep your eye contact. I've said that a whole lot of times. It's very important. Try to distribute your time evenly by looking at your local students the same amount of time you look at your remote students. So that might be something that you really have to start kind of cautiously thinking about, is maybe when you do different transitions from activity to activity, maybe say, okay, now I need to focus on these guys a little bit more. Find a way that you can try and control your time that you're spending with eye contact or communication with each site. Try and speak in the same tone as you would in your traditional face-to-face course. You don't necessarily have to be louder unless you know there's some kind of problem with the audio system. Reduce any environmental noise, so close windows and doors, mute cell phones, turn off your computer alert sounds. I always forget to do that so that you don't have a mail ding or something coming through. Ask your students to practice this etiquette. Put it in your syllabus, have an agreement up front that they're aware of what they need to do. When delivering your presentation, go ahead and allow for that 2 to 3 second transmission delay. It can occur with audio. After the end of your comments, allow time for students to respond before you move on to the next discussion. Routinely check for coherence, but don't do it too often. Like maybe each time that you're going into a transition period within the class, you can and make sure that they are still with you and they hear what's going on. Dressing for the camera, this one may not be something that you're aware of, but when you're going to be teaching on camera, avoid wearing busy patterns like polka dot, stripe, or plaid. When you move around, they can cause a drifting effect that can make students that are viewing this dizzy, which obviously can reduce their engagement if they don't want to look at it because they're getting dizzy. Avoid wearing red and bright fluorescent colors. Red can cause seizures in some individuals, and they can also provide unwanted lines and distractions at the remote site. And that basically concludes the presentation, all of the different tips and best practices. And again, if you go back into my email, I have all these handouts for you. And I want to show you on the CITR website, if you go to wiu.edu/CITR, we have put this all underneath a area. So if you go under resources and then FAQs and you choose teaching via video FAQ, this is going to have all the different options that we talked about today. And when you go into each of these, you'll have a document, and these are going to be your handouts that I shared with you today. So you can always come back in to this FAQ and you can find the documents that I had talked about and shared with you today. So they're all going to be in this website. You just click on the question and that will pop you down. It will have links to those resources for you. Are there any other questions or things that we could talk about today?
I guess I would just, I guess for lack of a better word, would like warn anybody who teaches these that the evals are most likely going to be much lower on the remote side. At least that's been my experience, and I feel like I tried a lot of different things. I think, again, the big thing is making it to the other location. I think that that would really help. But, you know, I worry for more junior faculty taking this on, you know, in terms of just knowing you might have to prepare a narrative for your file on, you know, kind of all the things you tried. And, you know, if the evals for the video conference course obviously are lower than what you usually obtain, like rating wise, then, you know, hopefully reviewers would be understanding. But it does, you know, historically mean lower evals, so it's just a point of concern, I guess.
Okay. Okay.
I don't really have anything else.
Okay. Steve, I see that you just got logged in with us. Not sure, maybe you had technical issues, but I have this recorded and I can send it to you via email, or we can get together for a one-on-one at your convenience to complete the webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and end with that. If you guys have any questions or you want any further ideas, feel free to contact me anytime. Okay?
Thanks so much,
Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
You too.